Welcome to Enchanted Astrology with Ariel Smith. This is the forecast for February 18th through the 24th. Now, before we begin, I do invite everyone to just take a slow, nourishing breath in and a slow breath out. We often forget to take intentional breaths during our busy days, so I do like to offer that at the beginning. Now this week, the sun moves into Pisces on February 18th, so we are officially in Pisces season. But before we talk more about Pisces, I want to focus first on something bigger that I feel is going on in the background, shaping this whole period. And that is the conjunction between Neptune and Saturn in Aries. Now, this feels like a very long-term shift for us around authority and responsibility. Now, Neptune and Saturn in Aries, for me, are telling a story of stop outsourcing your authority. Now, Neptune represents the ideal of something, the ideal state. And Saturn represents, as we know, structure, responsibilities, boundaries, authority. And Aries represents the individual, the self, the autonomous individual, your independence. And when Neptune and Saturn meet together at 0 degrees of Aries, this focus is very much telling us, how do I take responsibility for myself? And where am I giving my authority away? So Neptune in Aries brings up the ideal of a self-empowered human being. Someone who governs themselves, someone who doesn't automatically defer to a system to decide what is right. And Saturn in Aries wants structure at the level of the individual. So this combination together suggests we are moving out of a time where outsourcing authority is sustainable. I was recently talking with my sister because she's reading the book Anarchy as Order by Mohammed Bamia. And in that book, Bamia talks about how societies often give authority to what he calls abstractions. And these abstractions are things like the state, the market, the system, right? They're not people. They are ideas, and once authority is given to an abstract system, it can act in ways that individual humans would not personally take responsibility for. So he argues that order doesn't have to come from centralized control. It can emerge from individuals acting responsibility and directly within their communities. So this theme really strongly connects to this Neptune-Saturn conjunction, right? We are very used to giving our authority to systems. So governments have, the authority to incarcerate someone or wage war, which at the individual level we do not have, nor would we want to. Educational systems decide what counts as legitimate knowledge and can grant credentials that us as individuals cannot grant ourselves, right? Medical systems define treatment standards. Financial systems determine value. So we hand over power because it feels efficient, it feels convenient, it feels structured. But Saturn in Aries is looking at what responsibility needs to be returned back to the individual. So, and not promoting, and Saturn is not doing this and promoting like a reckless and chaotic system. It is asking for this self-governance that is at the level of the individual. It's asking for that authority to be at the level of the individual. Now, Aries is an energy that works moment to moment. It is not planning for the future. It is responding to what is happening right now. And Saturn usually prefers long-term rules that apply to everything, right? So Saturn is slightly uncomfortable here. It does make sense why Saturn is said to be in its fall in Aries, because this approach isn't about one universal rule for every situation. This approach is actually heavily about using our discernment in real time, right? So as an example, we can think of parenting, like a rigid rule that says always do it this way, but in real life doesn't really work that way. It doesn't always fit that rule. Sometimes you need to assess the specific situation, the specific child, the specific moment, and that requires presence. It requires being in each moment and discerning based on a large context. That requires energy, and it also requires not being in constant survival mode. So being able to act as our own authority, self-govern our own individual selves, takes a certain level of capacity that before we wouldn't have had, being in survival mode, where we are more reactive than responsive. So this configuration of planets and the energies we're looking at now suggests that we are being asked to build that capacity, because this is what wants to be lived next. And we also have Pluto in Aquarius. This conjunction is forming a sextile to Pluto in Aquarius. And Pluto in Aquarius is about this deep transformation of our collective systems, right? So technology, institutions, social structures, we're already seeing this deep mistrust in these institutions growing, right? We're seeing exposure of this corruption, of inefficiency, of this misuse of power, and Pluto is exposing what is not working. And Neptune Saturn conjunct in Aries is supporting this by shifting authority back onto the individual. So Pluto dismantles at the collective level and Saturn restructures at the personal level. So they are very supportive of each other in the sextile, working together. We also have Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius. So Black Moon Lilith is in trine to this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries and in sextile to Pluto in Aquarius. And Black Moon Lilith represents what has been suppressed, right? So especially something like anger around disempowerment. And in Sagittarius, that is the sign of our belief systems, of these larger systems like religion, law, ideologies. And Lilith exposes where this truth has been manipulated, right? So that can show up as anger at these institutions, frustration with these narratives, a deep distrust of any sort of ideological dogma, right? It can expose the corruption, the hypocrisy in leadership. And because Sagittarius governs the big belief systems, Lilith here is identifying where these belief systems have actually justified doing harm. So that anger that you feel towards that is not random. It's very informative. It's showing us and pointing to where power has been misused. And because Lilith is working harmoniously with Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto, this exposure is supporting the larger shift. When you clearly see the distortions going on, it becomes harder to continue participating in it unconsciously. Now we also have Uranus in Taurus that is also forming a sextile to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And Taurus is about value, our material stability, and what we build in this physical world. And this is where we often project our power outward. We give something outside of ourselves power that we believe we do not have within. So, for an example, you might believe that your health depends entirely on a specific food or a certain supplement. And while that thing may help you on your journey to health, if you believe it is the sole source of your well-being, you've projected your power onto it. And then later, if it's removed, you feel unstable because you haven't claimed that power within. Divination tools are a great example of this, because you use the tool because you believe you need the tool in the first place. But the more you use it, you actually discover that you don't really need the tool anymore. You've absorbed the power that you've given to the tool back internally, and you discover you don't need it anymore. It reminds me of the Wizard of Oz, where Glinda tells Dorothy, "You've had the power all along, my dear." The ruby slippers were an object Dorothy believed had the power to take her home, but she had that power within. She just had to discover it in the slippers first. And that's the process of giving something outside of yourself power until you can reabsorb that power back into yourself. And that is actually what we call magic, is the process of giving something outside of yourself powers that you believe you do not have within. So this applies to systems too, or routines, or tools. It can be anything. And Uranus in Taurus disrupts our attachments to these external sources of security. So this sextile is helping us to gently recognize where we've been giving our power away, so we can start taking it back, we can start reclaiming it back, or we can start absorbing it back within. Now, the Sun moves into Pisces February 18th, and Pisces is about meaning and compassion, spiritual connection. It is that process that when external systems start to feel unstable, start to collapse, lose their meaning, Pisces turns inward. So there can be grief here. There can be grief around having to let go of structures that you once trusted. Grief around everything that's coming up in terms of those structures. it can feel very disorienting because we're used to orienting ourselves to these external systems, to bending towards them, and now they're falling away, they're unreliable, they're obsolete. So this process of reorienting back inward to our own meaning, and this Pisces season is working with that process with the sun here, where we're actually looking at what does give my life meaning now. So this is done through your own personal connection to the divine, your own personal connection to God. And this is that spiritual process of discovering what feels true within me. And that doesn't require any external validation. And in fact, it can't be externally validated because it is an internal process. So Mercury traveling through Pisces is shifting our thinking from this purely logical, linear framework into a more intuitive understanding. So it is less focused on that external validation, the external data, and it's more about what feels right inside. And Venus traveling in Pisces is helping with this. It's drawing in experiences that are aligned with this compassion and unity, drawing in people, right? You don't need to figure it all out this week because that's not required. What is required is just coming into your own internal knowing and allowing Venus to align your worlds accordingly. So just stay connected to what feels aligned at this deep heart level this week. And the South Node in Virgo, these node placements right now also support this overall theme, this overall energy, because the South Node in Virgo is really telling us that we can't move forward using the same over analytical, controlled mindset that we have been operating on. It's not allowing us to move forward with the same perception. The way that we think we know the world, the way we have been perceiving the world is deeply changing. And the North Node in Pisces is us growing toward a more compassionate and deeper understanding. So I hope this is helpful and supportive for the week ahead. If you'd like to explore these energies somatically, the Pisces Yin Yoga class is featured this week on my website, as we are now in Pisces season, so that is available at enchantedastrology.ca. And as always, thank you so deeply for being here with me today. I will be back next week with another episode.